what's up guys? My name is Zach and today I am driving a 1946 Crosley pickup. Up front is a 0.7 liter inline 4 and down below is a 3-speed manual transmission. Now I am super excited to be driving this Crosley pickup for two reasons. First of all, this is the first Crosley to be featured here on the channel. However, it will not be the last since I also have a station wagon video coming out. But the second reason is that this is one of the first vehicles built after World War II. And this specific car has an amazing story behind it, which I'll share towards the end of the video. But if you would like to submit your own vehicle, you can head on over to my website, zackpradel.com/submit. It's a quick and easy submission form. It takes under a minute to fill out, and I come out to you. But let's get back to that 720cc inline 4 under the hood. Well, originally, this came with Crosley's tin engine, which was actually used as a generator in World War II. You see, Crosley was a part of the war effort and helped out with that, and so they built generators along with like turrets and other things. And so when they wanted to build a car after the war, they said, let's just use our generator engine. The only issue was that generators in the war only lasted about 6 months before they got swapped out. And so what seemed like a lot of R&D was actually only 6 months of R&D. And so the engines were very, very unreliable. You're not going to see really any Crosley still having the tin engine. So this was swapped out with a slightly newer cast iron one. However, it does have an overhead cam and was one of the first vehicles to do so. It makes 26.5 horsepower, and let me tell you, 26 would have been too little, and 27 would have made this thing a monster. So 26.5 is pretty good here today. Like I said, paired to it is a 3-speed manual transmission that has been fighting me tooth and nail all day. It is unsynchronized and it's not very happy, but that's okay. Last but not least about the drivetrain of the Crosley, it is rear-wheel drive. And although this truck didn't come with it, in the later 1940s, Crosley was actually the first manufacturer to offer disc brakes in the United States, which is very, very cool to see. Like I said, this one particularly doesn't have it, but something cool for the Crosley name. How does it feel to drive the Crosley pickup? It's crammed. Very tight in here. Visibility is okay, but the biggest thing is that it has very, very primitive suspension, and so over bumps, it bounces like a 1980s Pintmobile. This feels very 1930s, and I've driven a handful of 1930s cars. It feels just like that. But you can't really blame it. There was a war on, you know? So I'm just happy to be scooting along in a little Crosley pickup here today. With that stuff out of the way, let's talk about the interior. Well, in front of me, I have 4 gauges to the left for my amperage, fuel, oil pressure, and coolant temperature. And off to the right, I have my speedometer only going up to 70, which is still very optimistic for this vehicle. But it does say Crosley Motors, Cincinnati, Ohio. This is a Midwestern car, baby. Steering wheel doesn't have anything on it, and off to the left, I have my starter button, but that's it. And moving on to the door, I don't have any cranks for the windows because they're actually slide-out windows. Later Crosleys, you could actually option crank windows. That was an upgrade. Never did I ever think that crank windows would actually be an upgrade, but they were for the Crosley brand. And then you have the latch for the door, which is in the absolute worst spot imaginable. It's all the way behind your shoulder. Who thought this was a good idea? I don't know, but they need a stern talking to. Moving into the center, we have where a radio would be in other Crosleys, but this pickup truck didn't get a radio. And then we have our key to start it in the center, headlights to the left, choke off to the right, and our little heater knob next to the hood latch down below. Our little heater is just under the dash. It's just this little piece, and it's the most adorable thing I've ever seen in my life. Of course, this means that there are no cup holders in the interior, so the most predictable thing of 2024 has been that the 1946 Crosley fails the big friggin' bottle test. Now, the seats are okay. The seats themselves aren't uncomfortable, but I'm being smashed up against the driver's door. My head is being smashed by the ceiling, and so this is a little bit tougher to fit in. Now, the later wagon, let me shut this off so you can hear me. The later wagon actually has a lot more space, and I'll show that on camera now. if you are looking to buy a Crosley and you are worried about the space, the later wagons are a little bit more spacious, which I've actually been able to test, which is super cool. We don't have any back seats, however, we will talk about the bed because it is a pickup truck. All right, we're on the back of the 1946 Crosley pickup, and it's so cool seeing how primitive this truck was. Because also, it should be stated, pickup trucks in the United States weren't very popular. They weren't really a thing, or at least one that had more car proportions. And so this was definitely something kind of new on the market as well. You could see the tailgate. You just have these little pins. It's very hard to do one-handed. Give me a second. There we go. And then it will come down to about there where it rests on the bumper. So that is the rear tailgate of a Crosley pickup. Now, we will talk about this wood here in a second, and we will talk about the fuel filler cap because that's where you put fuel in. So we'll talk about that in a second because that is specific to just this truck and no other Crosley pickups. They later put a tube that would go from there up over the wheel well and out the side to fill it up like a normal car. But that is the rear cargo space of the 1946 Crosley pickup. Now we gotta talk about the looks, and I love the red color. I think it's overall a visually very good looking car. However, this started the style of pickup that was so popular from the 1940s through the 1970s. This was one of the original pickup trucks for consumers to buy. And so it started a style on its own, and I don't feel like it gets enough credit for that. So I want to give it its flowers here today. With all of that being said, let's get on to my final thoughts, and they are going to be rather lengthy. Let's talk about the Crosley brand. Crosley was started by Powell Crosley Jr. in Ohio, here in the United States. This is an American company. A lot of people think it's British. It's actually American. In 1907, Powell Crosley Jr. tried to make his first production car called the Marathon 6, and no one bought it. He tried again in 1913 making the Sidecar, which is a motorcycle car hybrid, and nobody bought it. So in the 1920s, he started making radios and built one of the most successful radio companies in American history. They were one of the first radio broadbands to talk about and broadcast World War II. In 1929, they started making aircrafts. In 1931, they started making refrigerators and appliances, which most people either know them for the radios or their appliances. And that's actually why this car is under 48 inches wide, because it was able to be sold in appliance stores and fit through the double doors. But then in 1939, Powell Crosley Jr. wanted to try cars for a third time, and he unveiled his new vehicle at the Indianapolis Speedway. And it was sold at hardware stores across the nation. It was one of the first American cars to have disc brakes. And if we're talking firsts, Crosley was one of the first companies to put shelves in refrigerators, which sounds really simple, but it actually wasn't. Crosley was also the first manufacturer to use the term sport utility vehicle, so the SUV craze that we're currently going through here in 2024, you can blame Powell Crosley Jr. But now we got to the 1940s, and World War II was sweeping the world, as we know. Crosley was contracted by the U.S. military to build generators and turrets and other military tools like every other manufacturer did in the time. Ford was making the bombers and the Jeeps, and Overland Willys, of course, was also building the Jeeps and things like that. So every manufacturing company in the 40s was doing that. But in 1945, Crosley saw that the war was starting to end, and although they legally weren't allowed to, they started development on their new vehicle. You see, with the contract with the government, they had to just build military stuff, but under secrecy and during the nights, Crosley started planning their next vehicle, which was their pickup truck, this vehicle. And they did so by making 3 prototypes in the back of the factory under tarps. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is one of those prototypes. That's right, the serial number has an X in it, meaning this is one of the 3 prototype trucks that they built during World War II under secrecy in hopes that the war would end soon. Now, there's a couple of things on this truck that didn't quite make it to production. The filler neck is underneath the rear mat of the bed. So if you wanted to fill up your vehicle with gasoline, as most cars need, you had to remove almost everything from the truck bed, kind of defeating the purpose. purpose. There's also this wooden back and wooden box on the back and inside of the truck. This was actually later removed for production as well, and they actually lengthened the bed a little bit. This is a prototype pickup truck built during World War II under secrecy in America, and that might be one of the coolest vehicles I've ever driven. One of the most monumental, one of the most special. And I get to actually talk about it not as one of those crazy prototypes that you'll never see or is tucked away in some museum's archives. No, I'm driving it here today. This is prototype number 2. And the first prototype that they built was actually later crushed. And so only 2 remain in the world, and I'm here in one today. Now, they later went on to build 8,800 Crosley pickups between 1946 and 1952, where Crosley unfortunately met its demise and went out of business. Now, I'll have a video out later this year. It might already be out by the time you're watching this video. If it is, it'll be linked at the end, of a Crosley station wagon. And in that video, I'll talk about why Crosley ended. But the long and short of it is that when the other big 3 manufacturers started producing cars after the war, 1947, 1948, 1949, they started to ramp up production again because they didn't get the jump like Crosley did in secret. Their prices were way more competitive. You could get a lot bigger cars for less money, and so Crosley didn't really have the market cornered anymore like they did coming out of World War II. And they were able to get that jump out of World War II because of this prototype. That is the coolest thing in the world. Huge thank you to Dennis for letting me take out his prototype 1946 Crosley pickup. What an amazing piece of American history. Dennis is the president of the Illinois Crosley Club. Absolutely wonderful. Such a great group. If you're interested in Crosleys, please go check them out as well. Dennis has been wonderful to work with, and I look forward to making more videos with him in the future. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Don't forget to rate the video, comment on the video, and subscribe if you really liked it. Take care, guys.